The 1991 16-race Grand Prix season saw the 34 entries for the championship assemble in Phoenix, Arizona for round one of the series. Defending champions McLaren now had V12 Honda power for Ayrton Senna, teamed for the second year with Austria's Gerhard Berger. Rivals Ferrari had Alain Prost, now joined by 1990 star newcomer Jean Alesi. Nigel Mansell had returned to Williams, where he joined Riccardo Patrese. Benetton was led by Nelson Piquet, backed up by his old friend Roberto Moreno. Latest Grand Prix challenger was Irishman Eddie Jordan, with Ford V8-powered cars driven by Andrea de Cesaris and Bertrand Gachot. Senna was the first pole position winner of the year, with Alain Prost joining him on the front row, the two Williams Renaults on row 2, now fitted with semi-automatic gearboxes. Senna went straight into the lead at the start, from Prost, then the two Williamses, Berger and Alesi. But Senna was soon in his customary position at the head of the field. Behind him, however, there was a battle between the two Williamses. A charging Patrese tried to take third off Mansell, only to lock up and go straight on down an escape road. He was able to rejoin in 6th place, soon after catching an overheating Berger and taking the Austrian for 5th place. He moved up another place when teammate Mansell's new gearbox failed, the Briton pushing his car out of 3rd place. Berger was another retirement, with a failed fuel pump. He got someone else to do the pushing. Patrese was still charging hard, catching Ferrari's Jean Alesi and passing him for 3rd place as they approached the scheduled tyre stops. Senna was so far ahead that he never even lost his lead during his brief stop. Out of the race soon after went Riccardo Patrese. He couldn't find a gear and freewheeled into a spin, but the car was immovable. Also out and quitting the scene was Roberto Moreno. The replay told us everything. After Patrese had spun, he'd been hit by Moreno's Benetton. Now they were both out of the race. Fortunately, both were unhurt. Late in the event, Prost picked up 2 places when he caught Piquet, still on his original Pirellis, and a gearbox-troubled Alesi. The older Frenchman moving up from 4th to 2nd. Out of the race went Bertrand Gachot, nearly hit by Piquet when he had spun out of a very promising 8th place, but now joining Martinez Minardi in the dead car park. There were no such problems for Senna, of course, heading for his 2nd successive Phoenix victory and his 5th in North America, earning 10 points this year for victory in the new World Championship scoring system. Delight then for Ayrton Senna, who was joined on the rostrum by Ron Dennis, his team boss, and 2nd placed Alain Prost and 3rd placed Nelson Piquet. Two weeks later, the championship had moved to Senna's home circuit of Interlagos at Sao Paulo for the Brazilian Grand Prix, a race that he had never won. Things looked a little too hot for Berger's 4th place McLaren on the grid, which had the makings of a fire, and there was still smoke from the rear end as Senna led the two Williamses into the first corner, followed by the still smoky Berger and Alesi. Gabriele Tarquini's AGS was an early retirement. Senna then led from Mansell in 2nd place, the Williams drivers having assumed the mantle of main McLaren challengers from Ferrari. After 20 laps of mainly holding order, the scheduled pit stops began. Patrese was an early visitor, rejoining in 4th place. behind him were Alesi and Berger, rejoining 6th and 7th respectively. Piquet, however, hadn't stopped and was caught and passed for 3rd place by Patrese. Both moved up another place when an unhappy Alain Prost made a 2nd stop for tyres, rejoining 7th ahead of teammate Alesi, who would also make another stop. Berger took the non-stop Piquet for 4th place just before the Brazilian finally settled for new tyres. Senna was never very far ahead of 2nd place Mansell, but the Englishman suffered a cut tyre and had to pit for new tyres, giving Senna a more comfortable lead. Soon after he rejoined, however, Mansell's gearbox selected first by accident, causing this spin, and when he came to look for gears to restart, there was nobody home and he was out of the race. Senna was in enormous trouble with an unpredictable gearbox during the closing laps, and to make matters worse, it began to rain. Tackling a slippery Interlagos with just 6th gear in the rain on slicks, Senna finally broke his duck at his home circuit, to the enormous delight of the crowd. There was equal delight in the pits from McLaren's Ron Dennis, while the winner himself was exhausted from wrestling his car around the circuit. But he desperately wanted to make the podium for his home crowd, where he shared the honours with an equally troubled Patrese and teammate Gerhard Berger. A month later, and the weather seemed to have changed little at Imola for the San Marino Grand Prix, where the drama started early. Alain Prost hit a river on the final parade lap and spun off, to be joined soon after by Gerhard Berger. At least the Austrian was able to restart. Prost's race ended there and then. The tifosi, the Italian fans, were not impressed. At least local man Riccardo Patrese led poleman Senna off the start, while 4th placed Mansell made a dramatic start, forcing Alesi onto the grass when he missed a gear. Patrese led from Senna, Modena and Berger, then Alesi. Mansell's race, however, ended when he was hit from behind by Brundle, who thought that his compatriot was heading for the pits. Prost was out, and now Mansell too, after just one lap. But that wasn't all. Piquet slid off at Tosa on lap 2, and he was out for the day. Back in the pits, Mansell vented his feelings to engineer Dave Brown before stomping away. Not a happy man after his 3rd retirement in as many races. Meanwhile, Jean Alesi took 4th place off Stefano Modena for a second or two before joining friend Piquet in the sand trap at Tosa. Both Ferraris out within 3 laps. So Riccardo Patrese led from Ayrton Senna. But as the Italian Williams driver headed for the pits to change to dry tyres, a camshaft sensor failed on the engine. Although this was later changed, Patrese's effort was effectively over, retirement coming a few laps later. Senna now headed teammate Berger in a tight McLaren Honda 1-2 as the track dried out, completing a Honda-powered quartet with the 2 Tyrrells. But then Nakajima retired with broken transmission, and teammate Modena quit from 3rd place with the same problem. Blundell was also in trouble, running as high as 10th before gearbox trouble intervened. causing a dead engine, which the driver, however, still managed to restart. In spite of a flashing oil light, Senna took the checkered flag for the third race in succession, with Gerhard Berger in second place again. Belgian newcomer Eric van der Poel had been fifth, but lost fuel pressure on the last lap, leaving him ninth. McLaren first and second then, with JJ Lechto picking up third place for the Scuderia Italia team and making his first visit to a Grand Prix podium. Two weeks later, it was down the road to the jewel in the crown, Monaco. Once again, it was an all-Honda front row, but this time with Modena starting alongside poleman Senna. Senna went straight into the lead from Modena, Patrese and Mansell. But at Saint-Devote, Piquet and Berger came together. Berger was able to restart with a damaged nose section. But later on in the lap, Piquet pulled off with suspension damage when in fifth place. Disappointment for the local resident, but he doesn't much like this circuit anyway. Senna then led from Modena, followed by the Williamses, Patrese ahead of Mansell and then Prost in the Ferrari. But Senna had a nasty experience when a marshal ran across the track in front of him. Monegasque marshals hadn't been his favourite from the previous year when he'd had an incident with them. But let's have a look at it again. Just see how close that marshal came to being hit by the McLaren. Drama of a different kind for Berger, who slid off the track after being blinded by oil on his visor. Second place Modena was badly held up by Pirro, which allowed Patrese to close right up. But as they went through the tunnel, Modena's engine blew dramatically. As Modena pulled off, Patrese was not only blinded, but found himself driving on an oil-covered track and was a helpless passenger as his Williams spun into the barrier, the Italian parking his battered car up the chicane escape road. Look at his hands on the wheel. Behind Senna, it was now Prost in second place, but that was in danger from a closing Mansell. The question was, where could Mansell overtake? Coming through the tunnel, however, he tucked himself into the Ferrari's slipstream and pulled out under braking for the chicane, moving up into second place in a puff of tyre smoke. One retirement was Mika Häkkinen's Lotus after an oil fire, while Prost decided on a late pit stop for new tyres, but a wheel nut was jammed under the car, preventing the Frenchman from rejoining. He was lucky only to slip from 4th to 5th places. Senna, meanwhile, having eased up a little due to falling oil pressure, headed for his 4th successive victory and a full house 40 points in the World Championship. Never had a driver started a World Championship year so successfully. In comparison, Nigel Mansell's 6 points for second place seemed paltry. It was his first finish of the year, and he was delighted to come in second. But Senna already had a 29-point lead in the World Championship, his nearest challenger being Prost on 11 points. Senna, however, wasn't entirely confident of the future, and his worst fears were realised in Canada. There, Patrese and Mansell were on the front row of the grid. When the lights turned green, the two Williamses disputed the lead down into the first corner. It was Mansell who got ahead, and as Alain Prost ran wide, Ayrton Senna popped through into third place. Mansell then led from Patrese, and the pair were soon pulling away. The Williamses were the class of the field, as Ayrton Senna had predicted. Aguri Suzuki, however, had a nasty shock on the first lap when his Lola caught fire when its engine blew and the fuel pump broke, feeding a big petrol fire. Patrese then was in second place from Senna, Prost, Alesi and Piquet. But Berger, who had been slipping back with a misfire, retired when a change of management system failed to cure it. Prost was also in trouble with electrical problems, troubling the gearbox, slipping from 4th to 6th, overtaken by Alesi and Piquet. Then Senna pulled out of 3rd spot with an electrical problem. Alesi, Piquet and Prost flashed past. As the Brazilian and the Ferrari driver battled wheel to wheel, Prost was lining up to overtake his teammate. And Alesi dropped another place before the hairpin. They all moved up as Senna coasted past on his quest to find a suitable parking spot. Prost took less time to find one. Out of 5th place soon after, another with electrical failure affecting the gearbox. Alesi pitted for fresh tyres, but they were no good when his engine failed, and Modena picked up 4th place. Soon after, he overtook Patrese, heading for the pits with a puncture, which put the Tyrrell driver up to 3rd. Mansell had it in the bag, or so it seemed, until he slowed to a halt with less than half a lap to go. It seemed that as Mansell waved to the crowd, the electrics had died and stranded him out on the circuit. Instead, a shocked but delighted Piquet, who was in the right place at the right time, headed for the checkered flag and victory in Canada in the Benetton, his 23rd Grand Prix win. Mansell could only shrug and ask, "What did I do wrong?" On the rostrum, Piquet had been followed home by Modena in 2nd place, while Patrese had charged up from his pit stop to finish 3rd. Nearly 50 trucks took Grand Prix Racing's belongings from Montreal to Mexico for round 6 of the championship, where Williams confirmed that they were on the ascendancy, with Patrese and Mansell on the front row, pushing Senna back to 3rd ahead of Alesi and Berger. And it was Mansell who took the lead on the long drag down to the first corner, where Patrese badly missed out to Alesi, going into 2nd place from Senna. In the jumble of the opening lap, Piquet got past Prost, and soon after, so too did Modena, pushing the Ferrari well back. But at the end of lap 2, Senna got past Alesi to move up into 2nd place. They were harried by Patrese, with Berger next up. But then the McLaren's engine blew dramatically in the face of Stefano Modena. So Berger was out of the race early on. Unfortunately, Pierluigi Martini went off on Berger's oil, although fortunately without injury to the driver. Patrese was in fine form and lined up to overtake Senna to move into 2nd place behind teammate Mansell. The Williams pair soon running nose to tail. Just a few laps later, Alesi also overtook Senna. But the Williams pair were in some ways holding up the others, for Mansell had been overheating from the early stages. Patrese able to overtake his teammate in a puff of brake smoke, although Mansell fought back. Alesi was challenging Mansell, but as he closed on the Williams Renault, he was frustrated by Mansell's relatively slow speed. Lining up to get into a challenging position, he then thumped into a curb and the Ferrari spun round. Fortunately, he was able to rejoin, but back in 9th place. Brundle was also in trouble in the Brabham, but was fortunately unhurt. The replay shows what happened. A rear wheel coming off the back of the Brabham after a pit stop for a change of tyres. Mansell had eased up to try and cool his engine, allowing Senna to challenge his 2nd place. Alesi had another spin, but this time it was caused by the engine and it was terminal. Although Mansell closed dramatically during the closing stages, having got his temperatures under control, victory went to Riccardo Patrese, his 4th win in Grand Prix racing. Designer Patrick Head was understandably delighted with his 1st win of the year. So too were the drivers, both relieved to have found reliability. Back in Europe, the French Grand Prix was held at the new Manicourt circuit, and Patrese's tail was well and truly up, the Italian on pole position with Prost alongside, then Senna and Mansell on row 2. But Patrese made a poor start when the lights turned green, engulfed by the slower cars, slipping from 1st to 10th. Worse was to befall Bertrand Gachot, who ended his race at the 1st corner. Prost, in what was now a revised Ferrari, led Nigel Mansell, followed by the 2 McLarens of Senna and Berger. Prost and Mansell gradually eased away from the McLarens behind. The pair joined by Alesi in 5th place ahead of the Benettons. Behind Piquet and Moreno came Gianni Morbidelli and then Riccardo Patrese. Berger was soon out, however, this time with engine failure, having been in 4th place. Further down the order, there were lots of spins. Capelli went out, but De Cesaris was able to rejoin in 23rd place. He eventually finished 6th. Prost and Mansell continued to duel. And when Prost came up to lap De Cesaris, Mansell made his move down the inside of the Ferrari at the end of the straight. Mansell in the lead then. But when Prost came in for tyres, it took 7 seconds. Mansell's stop, however, was longer at 10.5, and the Briton found himself back in 2nd place again and had to do it all over again. Prost from Mansell then. There was bad news for 11th placed Mark Blundell, who crashed into the pit wall, fortunately unhurt. At the front of the field, Mansell steadily hauled in Prost again, and at the same place as before, managed to slip past him and back into the lead again. During the closing stages, 4th placed Alesi closed on 3rd place Senna, the Brazilian saying that he had neither the chassis nor engine to race with the Williamses and Ferraris. But Mansell took his 17th Grand Prix victory and became the most successful English Grand Prix driver in the sport's history, surpassing Stirling Moss and accepting his trophy, ironically, from France's president, Mitterrand. The advantage was obviously to Williams Renault, and this was timely, as the field came to a remodelled Silverstone for the halfway point in the World Championship, the British Grand Prix. On pole this time was Mansell, with Senna alongside and their respective teammates on row 2. At the start, Senna went straight into the lead from Mansell. But watch Patrese. When he tried to turn into the first corner, he found Berger on his inside, the two came together and Patrese spun off, narrowly being missed by Jean Alesi, and when he rejoined, nearly being hit by Michele Alboreto. Senna's glory was short-lived, but going down the straight on the first lap, Mansell swung out of the McLaren slipstream and eased past into the new Stowe corner. Meanwhile, Patrese staggered back into the pits and retirement. After a tardy start, the Ferraris began to make their presence felt. Prost passing Moreno for fourth place, and Alesi soon did the same thing to move up into fifth. Mansell, meanwhile, had a secure lead from Ayrton Senna. Berger had the Ferraris behind him, Alesi surprising teammate Prost by overtaking him and moving up to fourth. That became third place when Berger, suffering bad tyre vibration following his first lap altercation with Patrese, ducked into the pits for fresh tyres. And that dropped him from third place to sixth. Prost had been challenging third-placed Alesi, but oil from his teammate's car covered his visor, and he suffered this harmless spin. Moments later, Mika Hakkinen had an equally harmless spin on the other side of the same corner, but was able to rejoin. Now on new tyres, Berger was moving back up the field, passing Nelson Piquet for fifth place, and soon pulling away from the Benetton. Soon after, Aguri Suzuki was stranded out on the circuit, and curiously, at the same time, Alesi came into the pits from third place with a broken nose section. The replay shows that Alesi had attempted to sweep past the Japanese drivers Lerus Lola, but Aguri had taken his line and the pair had collided, Suzuki spinning out of the race and Alesi retiring in the pits. Another casualty was Andrea de Cesaris, whose Jordan left the track at high speed due to a mechanical failure. De Cesaris was unhurt, having been in 8th place, but the car was not surprisingly badly damaged after going off heavily at Abbey Curve, bouncing back across the circuit, where he was narrowly missed by Nakajima and Prost. None of this would trouble Mansell, however, who is heading for his second successive victory in 8 days. Checkered flag then for Nigel Mansell at home at Silverstone. But there was a nasty sting in the tail for Ayrton Senna. Suddenly, his second-place McLaren ran out of petrol on the last lap, dropping him from second to fifth, promoting teammate Berger to second. But he also ran out of fuel on the slowing down lap, clearly a problem for the McLaren drivers. Mansell was not surprisingly delighted, as was the home crowd, but he was still 18 points behind Ayrton Senna in the series at the halfway mark. Mansell, however, was again on top at Hockenheim throughout the 2 days of practice and qualifying, but starting with Ayrton Senna alongside. When the lights turned green, it was Mansell who made sure that the McLarens weren't going to get ahead of him into the first corner. He found himself easily in the lead from Berger and then Senna. Further back, Mark Blundell had an early spin, and Nicola Larini was also a retirement. Meanwhile, Nigel Mansell led, pulling away from Berger and Senna. Then came Prost, the slow-starting Patrese, Alesi, De Cesaris, Piquet and Moreno. A high-speed convoy around this very rapid circuit. turned out to be too rapid, perhaps, for Pierluigi Martini, who was an early retirement with this rapid spin on oil from his Minardi's Ferrari engine, fortunately not making contact with other cars. Gerhard Berger was the first of those to make scheduled stops for tyres. There were problems with a fire at the back of the car, and also a problem with the front right corner, which resulted in a 16-second stop, dropping him from 2nd to 10th. Minardi's poor day continued with a blown engine for Morbidelli. Mansell's pit stop was a couple of seconds longer than it should have been, and he lost his lead to Jean Alesi, who wasn't intending to stop for tyres. But on the newer rubber, Mansell was soon able to pass the Ferrari driver and retake the lead. Mansell passed the Ferrari then, and in a relatively secure lead at the head of the field, even though Alesi was close behind but on older tyres. Patrese overtook Senna's third-placed McLaren and soon pulled away, leaving the Brazilian to battle with Alain Prost for many laps. Finally, the furious Frenchman tried to go round the outside of Senna into the first chicane, locked up and went down the escape road. He was unable to rejoin by going straight ahead, and deprived of a clutch, stalled the car, and that put him out of the race, and very unhappy about the Brazilian's tactics. No such problems for Mansell as he headed for the checkered flag. But Senna, in 4th place, once again ran out of fuel on the last lap, pulling off at the side of the circuit. And as Mansell headed for the checkered flag and a hat-trick of victories, his championship rivals Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna were studiously ignoring one another. So Nigel Mansell won from Riccardo Patrese, who took Jean Alesi for 2nd place. Mansell was now within 8 points of Senna in the championship as they headed for Budapest and the Hungarian Grand Prix. Here, McLaren had bounced back with revised engine and fuel. Senna was on pole and knew that if he beat Patrese into the first corner, he had every chance of winning. But the Italians so nearly put paid to those plans. Senna managed to get the lead down into the first corner. Patrese in 2nd place, then Mansell, Prost, Berger and Alesi, before a gap to Capelli. A good start from him. Mansell, however, was eager to get past his teammate, whom he felt was holding him up, showing his impatience. Patrese, however, was suffering a brake problem. Meanwhile, the pace was too hot for 4th-placed Prost, who retired with a broken engine. Senna still led, however, but now Patrese would accept that Mansell was quicker and wave his teammate through. Mansell moving up into 2nd place, going down into the first corner, virtually the only overtaking place on the circuit. Into the pits for a safe change of tyres came Ivan Capelli, competitive with the front runners from the start, having run ahead of Jean Alesi. Now Mansell would shadow Senna virtually to the end, following the McLaren being one thing, but actually overtaking on this twisty circuit being something altogether different. For lap after lap, the Williams-Renault shadowed the McLaren-Honda, but Mansell never really got close enough to challenge Ayrton Senna. Out of the race went Mark Blundell with a spin when in 11th place. Senna, however, did all that was expected of him, fighting off the brake-troubled Mansell during the closing stages and gradually easing away. checkered flag awaited him at the end, so that Senna was back on the winner's rostrum for the first time since Monaco, extending his World Championship lead from Mansell in second place, and Patrese, who was third, giving McLaren's Ron Dennis a champagne shampoo. So Senna went to Belgium on a roll. Furthermore, he had won the previous 3 races at Spa. Newcomer Michael Schumacher was the star of practice, replacing the jailed Bertrand Gachot in the Jordan team. Senna started from his 4th consecutive pole, with Alain Prost alongside, Mansell back in 3rd, and it was Senna who led from Prost, Mansell, Berger and Schumacher already up in 5th place as they set out on lap 1. But Schumacher was rapidly in trouble. Alesi sweeping past him as they went up the hill, out of Eau Rouge for the first time. Meanwhile, Berger was overtaken by Piquet at the top of the hill. The Benetton moving up into 4th place. While further back, Schumacher's clutchless Jordan was wheeled away. Prost was another early retirement with a broken oil line, retiring from 3rd place. So Senna led, once again harried by Nigel Mansell in 2nd place. When Senna pitted for tyres, it was a relatively slow 9.8 second stop, dropping him to 5th place. When Mansell came in, his was a quicker 7.4 seconds, rejoining 3rd. He then caught and passed Gerhard Berger to move into 2nd place. Leader Piquet and Gerhard Berger pitted for tyres a lap later. And that gave Mansell the lead over the non-stopping Alesi, but a few laps later, Mansell pulled off with an electrical problem which prevented him getting gears, and he was out of the race. And that left Alesi trying to hold off Senna. But suddenly the Brazilian lost gears and slowed drastically. Piquet, Patrese and De Cesaris closed in. Up from 17th on the grid, a brake-doubled Patrese passed Piquet to move into 3rd place, but promptly went wide and dropped back again behind De Cesaris. A lap later, Alesi's race was run due to a broken valve, handing the lead to Senna. De Cesaris, meanwhile, overtook the sliding Piquet for 2nd place, as would Patrese, and then the recovering Berger after a spin out of the pits. Berger ahead of Piquet. The Austrian picked up another place when, right at the end of the race, De Cesaris retired, his radiator ducts blocked and causing engine overheating. Great disappointment for the impressive Jordan team in their first year. Riccardo Patrese also was in trouble with gearbox problems, allowing Berger into 2nd place. Senna, however, was heading for win number 6 in this season. Further back, Patrese lost 3rd and 4th places to the Benettons. So another McLaren 1-2, and this time the champagne shower for team manager Joe Ramirez on the rostrum. Ayrton Senna now with a 22-point lead over Nigel Mansell in the World Championship. 2 weeks later, the venue was Monza for the Italian Grand Prix with the usual horde of tifosi. But they had to search back on the grid behind Senna, Mansell, Berger and Patrese for their beloved Ferraris on row 3. Senna made the best start to lead the pack in grid formation down into the first chicane. Now driving for Benetton, Michael Schumacher was able to watch the 2 Ferraris ahead of him. A lap later, Alesi managed to overtake Patrese for 4th place, but just like last year, promptly went off at the first chicane, which sent him into the pits for repairs. He was able to rejoin, but later retired with a blown engine. Moreno, having effectively swapped seats with Schumacher, went off at the 3rd chicane after locking up his rear brakes. Behind the battling Senna and Mansell, Patrese was able to overtake Berger up into 3rd place. And the Italian then caught his teammate, who waved him through and up into 2nd place to try and challenge Senna ahead. He fulfilled his role perfectly, slipstreaming the McLaren into the 3rd chicane to take the lead. Patrese then led from Senna and Mansell. But just 1 lap later, Patrese had a problem with 3rd gear and spun around, leaving the Senna-Mansell battle for 1st place again. Patrese was able to rejoin, but Berger and Prost were right up with him. So Mansell once again shadowing Ayrton Senna. Let's have a look again. Patrese was unable to get 3rd gear for a moment, and then found it, but locked up the rear wheels and spun round. A lap later, the gearbox broke altogether, and he was out of the race. So the Senna and Mansell battle continued to rage, Senna desperate to keep his championship rival behind him. But Mansell had seen how Patrese had overtaken the Brazilian, and now he would repeat the manoeuvre with just the required success. Senna, however, had flat-spotted his tyres and came in for a 5.9-second stop for new tyres, dropping back to 5th place. But he didn't stay there long, overtaking Schumacher for 4th place, and then he picked off his own teammate Gerhard Berger for 3rd place soon after, and finally demoted Alain Prost for 2nd place. But he couldn't catch Nigel Mansell, the British driver taking the checkered flag to win a thrilling Italian Grand Prix, with Senna in 2nd place and Prost salvaging some glory for the locals with 3rd place. Mansell had reduced the points gap now to 18. From Monza, it was down to Estoril for the first of the Iberian double-headers in Portugal. It was the championship contenders' teammates who held the front row, Patrese from Berger, with Senna and Mansell on row 2 ahead of the Ferraris. But Mansell was determined not to stay back there. At the start, Patrese led, but Mansell first of all picked off Senna and then Berger at the 2nd corner. The 2 Williamses then led the 2 McLarens, and then came the Ferraris, Alesi ahead of Prost. Mansell constantly shadowed Patrese. But then slipstreamed past him quite easily to lead this Portuguese Grand Prix. Senna was in 3rd place when he came in for a rapid 5-second stop for tyres, dropping from 3rd to 5th. Then it was Mansell's turn, and on the face of it, he should have been pleased with his 7.7-second stop. But as he accelerated down the pit lane, the mechanic on the right rear wheel knew that there was a problem. The wheel duly bounced away. The nut had not been done up properly. Tyres said it all. Watch it again. The man on the right rear says it's okay, but he doesn't know that the hammerman hasn't managed to put the nut on. Now the team had to lift up the stranded car in what is called the fast lane and fit the wheel, to Mansell's enormous frustration as he saw his championship chances slip away. However, he was soon able to rejoin. Gerhard Berger was a retirement from second place with a blown cylinder. And Alain Prost also went out with engine trouble. Martin Brundle was leading the third place battle, Alesi from Martini and Capelli, and Alesi not happy with the Brabham ahead of him. However, he managed to get past, as did Martini. But for Nigel Mansell, the end was nigh, as he was black flagged for having changed his wheel in the fast lane of the pits. It was a bitter blow to his championship chances, and his silent exit revealed his huge disappointment. Piquet was in sixth place behind Capelli when the Leighton house started jumping badly. And soon after, the nose section came off, putting the car into the barrier and elevating our cameraman up to fifth. But Riccardo Patrese was heading for the checkered flag and another Williams victory. Ayrton Senna was in second place and scoring points when they were still so vital. Jean Alesi was the third man on the rostrum. What a great season for Riccardo Patrese, like a fine wine, getting better every year. A week later, the championship was at the brand new Circuit de Catalunya outside Barcelona for the Spanish Grand Prix and the last European round of the series. Here, Mansell had to win, but Berger would start ahead of him, although the pair would relegate their respective teammates to row 2. At the start, it was Berger who made the best getaway on the damp track, from Ayrton Senna getting up into second place. Then came Mansell, from Schumacher, and then Patrese. Patrese being engulfed in the first corner. And Schumacher getting up close to Nigel Mansell, who was finding the conditions treacherous at the start. He was trying hard to overtake Ayrton Senna and didn't notice Michael Schumacher sneaking up behind him and slipping down the inside up into third place behind the two McLarens. Thierry Boutsen was an early victim of the conditions, as was Eric Bernard in the Larousse Lola. Mansell soon had his revenge on Schumacher, taking his third place back in fine style and rapidly catching Ayrton Senna just ahead. Prost was the first to stop on the drying track for slick tyres, having dropped to 13th place. Senna, with a relatively conservative setup for this race, was caught by Mansell, the pair fighting wheel to wheel, inches apart, as Mansell moved up to take second place behind Berger. Senna tried to fight back, however. Berger then pitted for slick tyres, but it was a long stop at 16.6 seconds, and it dropped him from first to fifth. Into the pits together came Ayrton Senna and Nigel Mansell. This was a battle for the lead. Senna was the quicker of the two, getting back into the lead ahead of teammate Berger, with Nigel Mansell rejoining in third place. Senna, however, realised that Berger was quicker than he was and would wave him through after Patrese had stopped for tyres. Berger then moving up into the lead. Senna had fitted a conservative choice of tyre and consequently had this spin, just missing Mansell, but being able to rejoin and dropping from second to 8th place. Now Mansell was catching Gerhard Berger and looking for a way past. Wheel to wheel they fought, and Mansell slid through to overtake Berger and take the lead. Berger wasn't to last much longer, however, and was soon out of the race with 2 cylinders inoperative. Alesi also overtook Senna, but only just, moving up into 4th place. But for Nigel Mansell, this was his 5th win of the season, which kept his championship chances alive, the gap between him and Ayrton Senna being 16 points as they headed east. But Williams had a tiny 1-point lead in the Constructors' Series, thanks to Patrese' 3rd place behind Alain Prost. And so to the huge crowds at Suzuka in Japan for the penultimate round in this Senna versus Mansell needle match. The pair starting 2nd and 3rd on the grid, but Mansell having to win to stay in contention. However, it was poleman Gerhard Berger who led down into the first corner from Ayrton Senna in 2nd place. Mansell, Patrese and Prost followed, everyone getting through the first corner this time without problems. But later on that first lap, Jean Alesi's Ferrari blew up in Martini's face. So Alesi out of the race early on. Meanwhile, Gerhard Berger and Ayrton Senna led from Nigel Mansell and Riccardo Patrese during the early stages. Mansell trying hard to get on terms, but De Cesaris caused a multi-car pile-up when he spun, and Pirro, Leto and newcomer Carl Wendlinger were all involved, but no one was hurt. Mansell, however, was shadowing 2nd-placed Ayrton Senna as the pair chased Berger. Mansell came right up behind Senna into his slipstream as the pair started lap 10. But down into the first corner, and the Williams slid wide as they turned in, and then slid wider onto the dust and dirt, spinning round and out of this Japanese Grand Prix. Mansell was out, his championship chance is over. Ayrton Senna was the world champion, and Mansell could only get out in sheer frustration, realizing that it was all over. He had been held up by Ayrton Senna, a relatively slow pace. Here it is again. Mansell saying later that he had been unable to find any brakes as he turned into that corner and had slid wide. And this was the championship over for the Brit. Now Ayrton Senna went racing, catching teammate Gerhard Berger, who duly waved him past and into the lead. So Senna leading on his way to the World Championship, but on the last lap, the Brazilian would repay the compliment to his teammate, for according to team orders, whoever had led the opening stages would be allowed to win the race. So as they came out of the chicane on the last lap, Senna duly waved his teammate past. They were both winners then. Senna, the championship, Berger the race. His first win for 2 years, putting McLaren back on top of the Constructors' Championship, but Patrese scored only 4 points to McLaren's 16. Ron Dennis was delighted with Ayrton Senna's 3rd World Championship.
I have in this year a lot of excitement, a lot of pressure, a lot of stress. It's been the most competitive World Championship that I have ever competed, because we fought with different cars, different engines, different drivers, not inside the same team. Therefore it was really tough. We start well the year, and then we had a tough time from the 4th race onwards, as you all know, and it was a result of a lot of push from myself, from Gerhard, to the team, to McLaren and to Honda and to Shell, that we managed to get step forward time after time, bit by bit, and we caught then the Williams Renault slowly, got closer to them, put pressure on them, won a couple of races at the critical part of the championship in Hungary and Belgium, scored the right results when we couldn't compete with the Williams at all, and when it came really to the time, we were able to do 1 and 2 again, which is fantastic. Therefore, it's been a memorable championship, not only for me, but I think in Formula One over the past few years.
No one wanted to remember Adelaide 1989, but in 1991 the conditions had more than a hint of déjà vu. No doubt thankful not to be on the grid was Alain Prost, sacked by Ferrari and replaced by Gianni Morbidelli. As the cars accelerated down through the spray to the first corner, it was Senna who led from Gerhard Berger, then Nigel Mansell, Nelson Piquet, Michael Schumacher, and then Jean Alesi, Riccardo Patrese and Gianni Morbidelli. All the drivers desperately scrabbling for grip on a slippery surface at the best of times. But only Ayrton Senna enjoyed any kind of visibility as he pulled away at the head of the field. The McLaren 1-2 in these early stages looked good for them to clinch the Constructors' title, which was still up for grabs. Gerhard Berger had a moment in the treacherous conditions which allowed Mansell up to second place, and he was soon challenging Ayrton Senna for the lead. As Mansell made his biggest effort, there were yellow flags on the back straight, which was half blocked by wreckage from a collision between Schumacher and Alesi, in which Larini had also been involved. Amazingly, no one was hurt as the cars threaded their way through the wreckage. For lap after lap, Mansell harried Senna, weaving through the spray sent up by the McLaren and desperately trying to pressure the Brazilian into a mistake. But then the conditions worsened, and suddenly Mansell's Williams got away from him and spun round into a concrete wall. The impact ripped off the left front wheel, and while Mansell remained in the car, Senna signalled that the race should be stopped. Not surprisingly, the red flag was soon shown. Mansell was helped from his car and hobbled away with a bruised ankle and a knock on the head. With no sign of a let-up in the weather, the race was finally abandoned and the results declared after just 14 laps and 24 minutes of racing, the shortest Grand Prix ever. Senna was the undisputed winner. Mansell was awarded second place and Berger third, in a soggy and anticlimactic end to the championship. It had been a year of constantly changing fortunes, but Senna had scored points consistently, even when McLaren were down. But after a tough and thrilling year, Ayrton Senna and McLaren were the 1991 world champions.